At 8:43 on the morning of my funeral, my ex-wife packed our daughter's lunch exactly the way I used to. I didn't see it happen. I learned the details later from Mara and Sophie, down to the order of the things on the counter. Sandwich first. Turkey on wheat, cut diagonally because Sophie had decided years ago that rectangles tasted worse. Fruit in the little blue container. Juice box tucked beside it so it would not roll. Napkin folded underneath. The note came last, torn from a yellow legal pad. Big math test today, you've got this. Love, Dad. Mara stared at the words after she wrote them. For years, that had been my handwriting on those scraps of paper, my stupid little routine, my way of making up for mornings when I had already left for work before Sophie came downstairs. After the divorce, Mara packed the lunches. Different bread, different snacks. No notes unless Sophie asked. That morning, she copied mine perfectly. The morning, everyone believed I was dead. Sophie was 9 and dressed in black for the first funeral of her life. She came into the kitchen carrying the teddy bear I'd won her at the county fair, one eye loose, stuffing showing through one paw. She saw the lunchbox and stopped. "You made it like Dad." Mara swallowed. "I tried." Sophie opened it, checked the sandwich, checked the fruit, found the note and read it without smiling. He always put the note under the napkin. "I know." Daniel Cross came in through the mudroom in a charcoal suit, carrying coffee and a foil-covered casserole somebody had dropped at his place. He had been Mara's boyfriend for months before the accident. He had already learned where she kept the mugs, which cabinet stuck in damp weather, and that Sophie hated pulp in orange juice. He looked at the lunchbox. "There'll be food at the church." Mara kept her eyes on the counter. "She won't eat it." "Then why make that?" Mara looked toward Sophie, who was pressing the note flat with both thumbs. "Because her dad would." That was happening 26 miles away, while I opened my eyes beneath fluorescent lights. The first thing I saw was a white ceiling tile, with a brown water stain shaped like Florida. The second was a nurse standing over me. "Can you tell me your name?" My mouth felt lined with sand. "Nathan Reed." Her expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough. "Say that again." "Nathan Reed." She looked at the chart clipped to the bed, then back at me. "What?" "Mr. Reed, you've been here 9 days." 9 days did not mean anything at first. It was only a number. Then I tried to sit up, and pain wrapped around my ribs. The nurse pushed a hand toward my shoulder. "Slow down. You were found off rural Route 14 after a crash. Concussion. 3 cracked ribs, bruised kidney, no identification on you. You were admitted as an unknown patient." "My truck." She hesitated. "The truck burned. Your wallet and phone were recovered from inside. There was one badly burned victim near the cab. The responding officers believed the vehicle had only one occupant." I stared at her. "They thought the body was me." "Yes." The room went very quiet. "My daughter, your family was notified. The identification was treated as presumptive because visual identification wasn't possible. Final testing was still pending." "What day is it?" She told me. My funeral was that day. I asked for a phone. She told me I needed a doctor. I asked again. Maybe it was my face. Maybe she'd already imagined what 9 days meant to a child. She handed me the desk phone. I called Mara first. No answer. I called my mother. No answer. I called Grace Covenant, because the church number was still in my head from Sophie's Christmas recital. A woman answered after 3 rings. "Grace Covenant. This is Nathan Reed." Silence. I could hear people moving in the background. "I'm sorry," she said carefully. "Who is this?" "Nathan Reed. The service for Nathan Reed. Is it today?" The woman stopped breathing for a second. "Sir, the memorial begins at noon." "I'm Nathan." Another silence. "I'm alive." She whispered something away from the receiver. I looked at the clock above the hospital door. "How long until noon?" 28 minutes. I hung up. The nurse stepped between me and the chair, where somebody had folded a pair of donated jeans and a sweatshirt. "You're not cleared to leave. My daughter is about to sit through my funeral, and if you collapse in front of her, that becomes the second worst memory of her life." She was right. I hated her for being right. "Get me the discharge form," I said, "and tell me how fast I can get a cab." The taxi voucher got me out of the hospital 14 minutes later. The driver looked twice at my hospital bracelet and once at the bruising around my face, then decided whatever story I belonged to was above his pay grade. "Grace Covenant?" he asked. "Fast as you can without getting us killed." He glanced at me in the mirror. "Specific request, I respect it." We pulled onto the county road. I borrowed his phone before we reached the first traffic light. My name appeared before I finished typing it. Nathan Reed, 1989, 2026. There are few experiences stranger than seeing the year of your death printed beside the year of your birth, while you are breathing hard enough to fog somebody else's phone screen. The obituary used a photograph from a lake trip 2 summers earlier. I had one arm around Mara. Sophie was between us, missing a front tooth and holding a melting ice cream. We looked happy. We probably were, for the second the picture was taken. Under the obituary was the memorial notice. "Funeral today, Grace Covenant, noon." Then I saw the photographs people had uploaded during the previous 9 days. My mother at a candlelight vigil. My sister standing beside Sophie. Sophie holding the teddy bear I'd won her at the county fair. And Daniel lighting a candle for Sophie when the wind kept killing the flame. Daniel carrying folding chairs into the church hall. Daniel walking Mara toward a car with one hand at the middle of her back. Daniel in a photograph where Mara had finally broken, her forehead against his chest while he held her. I knew they had been together before the crash. 8 months of divorce had made that fact unavoidable. It still looked different when I was supposedly dead. It looked permanent. The driver glanced at me again. "You all right?" "No. Need me to pull over?" "If you pull over, I'll walk." "Then we're not pulling over." I kept scrolling. My mother had posted a message asking people to remember me as a father first. Mara had posted nothing. That bothered me more than it should have. Then I found a photograph from the night before. Sophie asleep on Mara's lap, Daniel beside them, his coat draped over both of them. The caption came from one of Mara's cousins. "Family getting through the impossible." Family. I locked the phone and handed it back. How much farther? 11 minutes. I closed my eyes, and the crash returned in pieces. Rain hammering the windshield. Jacob Herrera laughing, because I'd called the motel coffee a war crime. Headlights sliding sideways. The truck leaving the road. A sound like metal being torn in half. Then cold mud against my cheek, and somebody shouting somewhere I could not reach. "Jacob." The nurse had called the dead man the other victim. I knew who it had to be now. Jacob had been riding with me back from the site. He had switched into the driver's seat 20 minutes before the crash because my eyes were burning from a 14-hour shift. My wallet and phone were still in the center console. The truck was registered through my company assignment. The accident had not needed a conspiracy. It had only needed darkness, fire, one wrong assumption, and me landing far enough down the embankment that the first rescue crew did not find me. A road maintenance team found me at daylight. By then I was unconscious and separated from everything that said who I was. That was all the explanation I needed. The rest belonged to paperwork. The driver turned onto Hill Street. Cars lined both sides for 3 blocks. My brother's pickup, my mother's sedan, Daniel's blue SUV. The church sign out front read, "Celebration of Life, Nathan Reed." For a few seconds, I couldn't open the taxi door. The driver looked back at me. "You going in?" I stared at the sign. "Apparently." He held out the phone. "You want to call somebody first?" I thought of Mara answering in the middle of the service. I imagined trying to explain the impossible over a speaker while Sophie watched her face. "No." I pushed the door open. My daughter has already waited 9 days. I had one stop before the chapel doors. Mara's house sat 2 blocks behind the church, and the taxi had passed the corner so quickly I almost missed the line of cars parked along the curb. I told the driver to let me out there instead. I needed 30 seconds to see what my death had done before I walked into the room where everybody was naming it. The house looked ordinary. That was the first terrible thing about it. The porch light was still on even though it was noon. Somebody had tied a black ribbon around the mailbox. Foil-covered dishes covered the table visible through the front window. A folding sign near the driveway pointed mourners toward the church. My old lawn mower was still under the side awning. The basketball hoop still leaned 2 degrees left because I had promised Sophie I would fix the post and never did. Then Daniel came out of the garage, carrying 6 folding chairs. He wore the same charcoal suit from the photographs, jacket off now, white sleeves rolled to his elbows. He loaded the chairs into the back of his SUV, went inside and came out with a box of bottled water. No performance, no grief-stricken pose, just work. My work. That thought came automatically, and I hated myself for it almost as quickly as I felt it. The chairs did not belong to me. Neither did carrying them. Neither did knowing where Mara kept the extra bottled water. But grief turns ordinary competence into territory if you let it. A woman stepped out of the house behind him. Carol Jensen, my mother's oldest friend. She had a platter in both hands. She saw me across the street. The platter tipped. I heard ceramic break on the sidewalk. Daniel turned at the sound. For a second, neither of us moved. He looked at me from 40 feet away, the same way the nurse had looked when I said my name. Like his brain had rejected the picture before his eyes could. Then he set the water down. Nathan. Carol covered her mouth. I crossed the street. Daniel did not come toward me. He did not run inside to get Mara either. Later, I understood why. He had already spent 9 days helping Sophie survive one impossible announcement. He was not going to deliver another one without knowing whether I was real. He stopped 3 feet away. What happened? I don't know all of it yet. His eyes moved over the hospital bracelet, the bruising, the clothes that did not belong to me. Mara's at the church. I know. Sophie too. I know. He looked toward the church steeple over the roofs. Do you want me to call her? Every angry part of me wanted to say no, because the idea of Daniel being the person who prepared Mara for my return felt unbearable. The better part of me said something else. If you call her, Sophie watches her face before she knows why. I'm not doing that to her. Daniel nodded. Carol was crying openly now. Your mother said we should wait, she whispered. She kept saying they hadn't finished the final identification. Daniel's jaw tightened. There it was again. Wait. A decision had been made while I was unconscious, and I still did not know by whom. I looked at the broken platter on the pavement. Funeral potatoes scattered across the sidewalk. It was absurd enough to make the whole scene feel real. Don't tell anyone yet, I said. Carol stared at me. Nathan, there are 200 people in that church. Then give me 5 minutes before there are 200 phone cameras outside. Daniel picked up his jacket from the SUV. I'll walk you over. I almost told him not to. Then I looked at the church, at the distance between me and the daughter who thought I was dead, and realized I was not steady enough to pretend pride was strength. Fine. We walked half a block together without speaking. At the corner, Daniel stopped. I'll use the front, he said. You should take the side door, fewer people. I looked at him. You've thought about this for 10 seconds, and you're already managing my funeral. He almost smiled. I've been managing parts of it for 9 days. That hurt, not because he meant it cruelly, because he didn't. He went toward the front steps. I went around the side. I didn't use the main entrance. That wasn't strategy, it was cowardice. The front steps were full of people I knew. I couldn't make myself walk through them while they were holding programs with my photograph on the cover. So I went around the side of the building, past the fellowship hall, and a row of trash cans overflowing with wilted flower wrappers. The side door was unlocked. Inside, the hallway smelled like old wood, coffee, and lilies. An organ played softly beyond the chapel doors. I followed the sound. At the last doorway, I stopped. The room was full. My former boss sat halfway back beside 2 men from the crew. Mothers from Sophie's school filled one pew. My high school football coach was there. Neighbors, cousins, people I had not spoken to in years but who apparently had enough of me left in their memory to spend a Saturday saying goodbye. At the front was a closed casket covered with white lilies. Somebody else's body was inside it. Behind the casket stood the same lake photograph from the obituary, enlarged on an easel. My mother sat in the front row with her back, so straight it looked painful. My sister sat beside her. Sophie sat between them, holding her teddy bear in one arm and the lunchbox in her lap. The lunchbox, blue dented corner, scratched zipper pull. I could see her fingers wrapped around it. Mara sat in the second row. She wore black and looked like she had not slept in a week. Daniel sat beside her. His hand rested on the top rail of the pew behind her, not touching her, but close enough that he could if she leaned back. The pastor was talking about reliability, about how I showed up when people needed help. I almost laughed. It was a flattering way to describe the exact flaw that had helped end my marriage. I was good at showing up for emergencies. Birthdays were harder. I stood there, listening to a man describe me as if my life had already settled into a lesson, and something ugly moved through me. For 9 days, everyone in that room had been forced to live with my absence. For 8 months before that, Mara and Sophie had been practicing. That thought hurt worse than the ribs. A woman in the third row turned toward the side aisle. Carol Jensen, my next-door neighbor growing up. She looked at me once, then again. The color left her face. Nathan. She did not shout. She did not need to. The word traveled through the chapel anyway. Heads turned one by one. Then all at once, my mother looked over her shoulder. Her hands locked around the pew in front of her. My sister stood so fast her program fell. Mara turned last. I watched recognition hit her in stages. Confusion, denial, fear, then something so naked I had to look away. Sophie followed everyone's gaze. Her eyes found me. The lunchbox slipped from her lap and hit the carpet. Daddy. I had imagined that moment in the cab. I thought I would say something good, something a daughter could carry for the rest of her life. All I managed was, "Hey, Soph." She stood. For half a second, she looked at Mara as if she needed permission to believe what she was seeing. Then she ran. She came down the aisle at full speed in a black dress that was too formal for her, and shoes that were too stiff for running. I bent just enough to catch her. My ribs exploded with pain. I didn't let go. She wrapped both arms around my waist and buried her face against me. "You said you'd come back." My throat closed. "I know. You said you always come back. I'm here." She hit me once in the stomach with a small fist. "Not hard. Hard enough. You were dead." "I know. That's not allowed." A laugh broke somewhere behind us and turned immediately into crying. My mother reached me next. She touched my face with both hands. No hug at first, no words, just her palms against my cheeks as if temperature was evidence. "You're warm," she whispered. "Hi, Mom." That was when she broke. Her forehead dropped against my shoulder, and she shook without making a sound. Over her head, I looked at Mara. She had not left the pew. One hand gripped the back of the seat in front of her. Her knuckles were white. Daniel had stood beside her, body angled slightly toward the aisle. It might have been protective. For one ugly second, it looked territorial. Then he saw me notice and stepped back. His face wasn't angry. It was stunned. "You should be dead," he said. It was the first honest sentence in the room. "I know." The pastor closed his Bible. He did not ask me to speak. Thank God. There are moments when silence is the only thing that doesn't make a disaster worse. The service ended without anybody officially ending it. There was no script for the dead man arriving alive. People left slowly. Some hugged me. Some stared. Some asked what happened and immediately apologized for asking. One old friend touched my arm twice before walking away, as if he needed to verify I stayed solid both times. My mother refused to let me out of her sight. My sister started calling relatives, who had already been called once that week with the opposite news. Sophie never moved more than 3 feet from me. The lunchbox came with us. Back at Mara's house, the 4 adults who mattered most stood in the kitchen and discovered there was no socially acceptable way to begin. Mara's house. I still thought of it that way now. 8 months earlier, it had been ours. The white cabinets were the same ones we'd painted together when Sophie was born. The farmhouse sink still leaked if you pushed the faucet too far left. But there were new things everywhere. A French press I had never bought. A different coffee brand. Daniel's jacket hanging on the chair where I used to drop mine. a drawing on the refrigerator of Mara, Sophie, and a tall brown-haired man in front of a yellow house. I stared at it too long. Daniel noticed. I believed them, he said. He had taken off his suit coat and rolled his sleeves. He looked exhausted. Police came to the house. The sheriff, your company. They said the truck was yours, your wallet was inside, and the body couldn't be visually identified. Your mother wanted to wait for final confirmation. I looked at Mara. That was new. Daniel stopped talking. Mara folded her arms. The sheriff said they were almost certain, she said. Your mother wanted us to wait anyway. And you didn't. Sophie had stopped eating. She wasn't sleeping. Every adult around her was speaking in half sentences because nobody wanted to say the word dead. The church suggested a memorial. I agreed. Before final confirmation. Yes, there it was. A choice I could resent even if I understood it. You moved fast, I said. Daniel's face hardened slightly. I was already here, Nathan. I know. Then don't make 9 days carry 8 months. Mara stepped between the sentence and whatever I was going to say next. Not here, not now. Sophie stood in the doorway with the lunchbox against her chest. Her face changed when she heard our voices. That stopped me. Mara saw it too. Baby, she said softly, why don't you go upstairs for a little while? Sophie looked at me. Not Mara. Me. Are you leaving? The question landed harder than anything Daniel could have said. No. Promise. I'm not leaving. She studied me for a second, deciding whether promises still had value. Then she went upstairs. I followed a minute later. Her bedroom looked almost the same as it had before the divorce. Pale yellow walls. Books stacked crooked beside the bed. A poster of the solar system peeling at one corner. The lunchbox sat open on her blanket. Can I come in? She nodded. I sat carefully beside her. The sandwich was untouched. The apple slices had started turning brown. Under the napkin was the note Mara had written. Big math test today, you've got this. Love, Dad. Sophie reached into the front pocket of her backpack and pulled out another scrap of paper. Older, soft from being unfolded too many times. My handwriting. Same sentence. You kept that. I keep all the good ones. What makes one good? When you write something that's actually about me. That hurt because I knew exactly what she meant. Too many of my notes had been generic. Have a great day. Love you. See you tonight. Promises written fast enough that I could make the early meeting. Mom did it right, Sophie said. She put it under the napkin. She did. Daniel can't do it right. I almost smiled. No. Too much mayo. Serious problem. Very. For a few seconds, she was just my daughter again. Then she looked at me. How long are you staying? I stopped smiling. I'm here now. That's not what I asked. 9 years old. Old enough to know the difference. I'm going to be here when you get home from school, I said. And tomorrow morning, and the next day. I can't fix 8 months in one promise, Soph, but I can stop making you guess. She stared at the note in her hand. You always say work will calm down. I know. It never does. I know that too. She leaned against my arm carefully because of the ribs. Okay, she said. Not forgiveness. Not trust. Just permission to try. That was enough for one afternoon. I found Daniel in the garage near sunset. He was putting tools into a plastic case. Not moving out. Not making a statement. Just doing something with his hands because standing still inside that kitchen had become impossible. You don't have to pack because I'm alive, I said. I'm putting your socket set back where Sophie told me it belongs. I looked at the case. That's not my socket set. Then apparently, I've been organizing somebody else's garage for 8 months. Neither of us laughed. He set the wrench down. I'm glad you're alive. You don't sound glad. I spent 9 days helping a little girl understand her father was dead. I held Mara while she picked funeral clothes. I drove your mother home when she couldn't see through the tears. Today, I watched all 3 of them get you back in 30 seconds. He rubbed a hand over his face. I'm glad you're alive. I'm also terrified of what alive means now. Both can be true. That answer was better than a noble one. I leaned against the doorframe. Did you love Myra before we were divorced? He didn't pretend not to understand. Yes. How long? Long enough that I knew to keep my distance. You had coffee with her. After school events, sometimes after church. She talked to you about us. Sometimes. That's distance. No, that's where it got complicated. I looked at him. Did you touch her, kiss her, sleep with her? No, not while you were together. Convenient definition. His jaw tightened. You want me to call it an emotional affair, call it that. I listened to a woman who was lonely. I should probably have told her to talk to somebody who wasn't in love with her. I didn't. That's mine. That was the first time he gave me something I could actually be angry at. And when did you tell her? After she filed. Before the divorce was final. Yes. So while I was still trying to save my marriage, you were waiting outside it. Were you? I pushed away from the door frame. Careful. You asked. I was trying. Nathan, you were taking extra shifts because being at work was easier than being in a house where Mara was angry at you. You called that trying because the mortgage stayed paid. I wanted to hit him. The part of me that wanted to hit him was also the part that knew he was not completely wrong. I don't know whether to hit you or thank you, I said. Do both if you need to. Then decide which one you actually mean. I stared at him. You practice that? No, I've just had 9 days without sleep. Everything sounds profound after 9 days without sleep. That almost got a laugh. Almost. He picked up the case and set it on a shelf. For what it's worth, he said, I never wanted your daughter to need me because you were gone. But she does. Sometimes. That's supposed to make me feel better. No, it's supposed to stop you from punishing her for it. That one landed clean. He walked toward the garage door, then stopped. Mara packed the lunchbox this morning. I know. She remembered everything. The diagonal, the blue container where you hid the note. I looked back toward the kitchen window. She watched you love Sophie for years, Nathan, even when she was furious at the way you loved everyone else. Then he left me alone in the garage. For the first time that day, I did not think of Daniel as the man who had replaced me. I thought of him as the man who had been present while I wasn't. I hated that more because it was harder to dismiss. Myra and I finally talked after midnight. Sophie was asleep. Daniel had gone home. My mother had called 3 times to make sure I was still alive, which I understood was going to be a recurring problem for a while. Mara sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee she'd forgotten to drink. I sat across from her. Your mother wanted us to wait, I said. Mara nodded. She kept saying the DNA wasn't final. The sheriff kept saying everything else pointed to you. Your truck, your wallet, your phone, the route, the timing. And you believed him. I believed the people whose job it was to tell me whether my ex-husband was dead. Yes, you still held the service. Her eyes sharpened. Do you want me to apologize for believing you were dead? I don't know what I want. Then don't turn that into something I did to you. I sat back. Fair, painfully fair. Daniel was already helping before the accident, I said. Yes. How much before? You know, when we started dating. I'm asking when you started needing him. She looked at me for a long time. Before I filed. There it was. Not cheating. Not innocence either. How long? Months. Did you love him? Not then. Did he love you? I didn't ask him. You didn't have to. Mara looked down at the table. Probably not. I laughed once without humor, and you still say there was nothing going on. I say I did not cheat on you. I did not kiss him. I did not sleep with him. I did not promise him a future while I was married to you. You gave him the part of you that was supposed to come home to me. Her head came up. No, Nathan. I stopped bringing that part home because every time I did, you weren't there to receive it. I opened my mouth. She kept going. Sophie's 8th birthday. I knew immediately. There was an electrical failure at the warehouse. There was always something. She waited until 8:30. She kept asking if we should save the candles. She fell asleep on the couch wearing the paper crown from her party. I called the next morning. You called and asked if she was sick. I looked at her. Do you remember that? Mara asked. I did. I had called from the parking lot outside the warehouse and said, "Is she sick? You sound weird." Because in my head, a missed birthday was disappointing. A sick child was an emergency. Emergencies I understood. "You were always there when something broke," Mara said. "The car, the roof, the plumbing, my laptop, Sophie's bike. You could cross the county at midnight if somebody said the word emergency." Her voice stayed level. "I stopped knowing how to reach you when nothing was broken. That was worse than yelling. I thought I was taking care of us. I know, that's why the divorce was so hard. You weren't cruel, you weren't drunk, you weren't cheating, you weren't some obvious villain I could point to and hate. You loved us. You just kept loving us from somewhere else." I stared at the coffee between her hands. "Daniel showed up." "Yes." "Sunday, Monday, Tuesday." "Yes." "And you let him." "Eventually, before the divorce was final." "Emotionally, maybe. That's the part I still argue with myself about. Physically, no." She met my eyes. "If you need to call that betrayal, I can't stop you. But don't use it to erase what happened before him." I felt the anger rise, and then lose somewhere to go. "I didn't know I was supposed to ask," I said. "Ask what?" "Whether you were lonely. Whether Sophie cared about the birthday more than the overtime. Whether being home counted if I was answering emails at the table." Mara's face softened despite herself. "That's the problem. You thought presence was automatic if your body made it through the door." I looked toward the hallway where Sophie slept. "What happens now?" "I don't know. With Daniel. I don't know. With us." She looked at me so steadily that for a second I could see the woman I married and the woman who divorced me at the same time. "You being alive does not make us married again. I know, and Daniel caring about us does not make you less her father. That one hurt. I know. Do you?" I didn't answer. Myra pushed the cold coffee toward me. "You don't have to solve the whole thing tonight." I took a sip and made a face. "This is terrible. It's been sitting there for 3 hours. Still somehow your best argument." "For the first time all day," she smiled. "It disappeared quickly, but I saw it." "Just be here," she said. "Not forever, not as a speech tomorrow. Then do it again." Before I could answer, the mudroom door opened. My mother walked in without knocking. She had changed out of the black dress from the memorial, but not out of the expression she'd worn since she touched my face in the church. Her eyes went to Mara first. "I told you to wait." Mara went still. I had been waiting for that sentence since Carol whispered it on the sidewalk. Hearing it from my mother made it heavier. "Mom, the testing wasn't finished," she said. "I said 1 more day, 2 more days, we could have waited." Mara stood slowly. "And I told you Sophie had stopped sleeping. She was asking me every hour if the police had made a mistake. I believed them when they said they were nearly certain." "Nearly?" "Yes, nearly. I made a decision with the information I had." My mother looked at me, and it was the wrong one. For a second, I wanted to let that stand. It would have been easy. Mara had agreed to hold my memorial before the final confirmation. I had walked into my own funeral because of it. I had every right to be angry, but there is a difference between being angry at a decision and pretending you would have made a better one from inside somebody else's grief. "She thought I was dead," I said. My mother stared at me. "Nathan, so did you." I wanted proof, because I'm your son. Mara had a 9-year-old who needed an answer. Those are different positions. Mara looked at me surprised. I wasn't defending the memorial. I still hated that it happened. I was defending the fact that grief does not become malice because the outcome proves you wrong. My mother's mouth tightened. "I still think she should have waited." "You may be right, and you don't." I looked at Mara. "I think if we spend the rest of this week deciding which person failed the death correctly, Sophie loses again." That ended the argument without resolving it. My mother came around the table and touched the back of my head, almost checking me again. "I'm taking Sophie Friday," she said. "You two need to sleep." "I'm not staying here," I said. Her eyes moved between Mara and me. "Good," she said. "One resurrection at a time." She left. Mara sat back down. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. I still think you should have waited." She gave me a tired look. "There he is." I'm allowed to think both things. Apparently we're all learning that. That was all she had asked for years ago. It sounded harder now, because I finally understood it. Sophie found me on the porch the next morning, with a school folder tucked under one arm. I had slept badly on Mara's couch, because the hospital had been right about the ribs, and I had been wrong about everything else. She sat beside me in pajamas and handed me a piece of construction paper. Father's Day, 2 months before the crash. 3 stick figures. Mara and Sophie stood together in the middle of the page. A third figure stood near the edge under a huge yellow sun. That's me. Sophie nodded. Why am I over there? She traced the crayon figure with one finger. I couldn't fit you in the middle. There are sentences adults spend years avoiding that children can say before breakfast. So you put me at the side. I gave you the sun. I see that. You like outside. I swallowed. Can I keep this? It was already yours. I just never gave it to you. She opened the folder again and pulled out a thick envelope. These two. Inside were 7 notes, one for each day before she was told I was dead. Day 1, we had pizza at school. The cheese was good, but the crust was hard. Day 2, I got 9/10 on spelling. I missed because again. Day 3, Mom says your phone is broken. I told her you'll call when it's fixed. Day 4, Daniel fixed my jacket zipper with pliers. Day 5, Grandma cried in the bathroom. I pretended I didn't hear because I didn't want to make her embarrassed. Day 6, Mom told me something bad happened. She said you died. I asked if heaven has phones. Day 7, I don't know where to send these now. I read the last one twice. 6 words. That was the one that destroyed me. The first note still assumed the world worked normally. Pizza, spelling, a broken phone. Then Daniel appeared in a sentence because he fixed a zipper. Then my mother cried. Then the word died, entered my daughter's handwriting. Then there was nowhere left to send the story of her day. You kept writing after they told you. One more. She pulled a final folded page from the back of the envelope. Day 8, Mom cried at breakfast. Daniel burned the toast. Everybody says I can cry, but I don't want to because then Mom cries more. I closed my eyes. Why didn't you give these to Mom? They were for you. Even when you thought I was dead. I didn't know if dead people could read. I looked at her. She shrugged. Nobody tells kids useful stuff. I laughed once through the pressure in my throat. That's true. She leaned against my shoulder. Dad. Yeah. Are you going back to work? Eventually. Her body stiffened slightly. I felt it. But not like before, I said. I already called them. I'm not taking the travel schedule I had. I'm not promising I'll never miss anything again because that would be a lie. I'm promising you won't have to wonder whether work automatically wins. She considered that. What if it's an emergency? Then I'll tell you. And if it's not an emergency, I'll learn to say no. You're bad at that. Apparently. She opened the folder to the Father's Day card again. My birthday is in 2 months. I know. Do you? That was fair too. June 17th. Chocolate cake. No strawberry filling because you say fruit doesn't belong in cake. Good. And you want the skating place even though you fell last time and blamed the floor. She smiled. The floor was slippery. That's usually how skating works. She rolled her eyes. For 1 second I had her. Not as possession. As connection. Then she looked back at the notes. I missed you before the crash too, she said. That was the sentence I would remember longer than the funeral. Because the crash had taken 9 days. I had been losing pieces of my daughter long before that. One ordinary absence at a time. The next week was not a resurrection. It was administration, awkwardness, and repeated proof that coming back alive did not reset anything. I rented a small apartment 4 blocks from Mara's house. I did not move back in. That mattered. Mara and I were still divorced. Daniel was still part of her life. Sophie still had school at 8:15 whether I was processing trauma or not. The county corrected records. My employer corrected records. Eventually, the dead man from the truck was formally identified as Jacob Herrera, my coworker and friend. I went to his family's memorial and stood in the back. I didn't make his funeral about the mistake that had given me 2. Then 8 mornings after my own service, Mara called. Sophie wants you here for breakfast. Okay. Daniel's here. I paused. Okay. His car was in the driveway when I arrived. For 3 seconds, I considered walking back to my apartment. Then Sophie opened the front door before I reached it. You're late. I checked my watch. I'm 4 minutes early. Breakfast early is different. Good to know. Daniel sat at the kitchen table. Mara stood at the stove making eggs. The four of us looked like the setup to a joke nobody knew how to finish. I took the empty chair. Daniel stood. I should go. Sophie looked at him immediately. Are you coming back? He stopped. The question was not about breakfast. I could see it on his face. He loved her, not in the dramatic way men in stories announce love. In the small way that knows which zipper sticks and how much pepper goes on eggs, and which school entrance floods when it rains. And because she loved him too, he had become dangerous to me. Not because he was replacing me, because hurting him could hurt her. Daniel looked at Mara, then at me. I hated the fact that the decision felt like mine, so I refused to make it one. Don't disappear on her just because I'm back, I said. Mara turned from the stove. Daniel stared at me. Nathan, I'm serious. I need to be here. You matter to her too. Both things can be true even if I hate how complicated that makes breakfast. Sophie looked between us. So he's coming tomorrow. Daniel exhaled. If your mom wants me here. Mara didn't answer right away. Good. I didn't want a choice made, because everybody was afraid of silence. Finally she said, we'll talk about tomorrow later. Sit for today. Daniel sat. No winner, no defeated man, walking into the rain. Just four people trying to eat eggs, while the old family shape refused to fit over the new one. Sophie took one bite and frowned at Daniel. Too much pepper. I used less. Still too much. She pointed her fork at me. Dad knows. Daniel looked at me. Apparently I do. How much? Almost none. That isn't seasoning. She's 9. She thinks ketchup is spicy. Sophie gasped. I do not. Mara laughed. A real laugh. It startled all of us. Then the room settled again. Daniel zipped Sophie's jacket when the slider caught near her chin. She didn't ask him. She just turned toward him automatically. My first instinct was jealousy. My second was shame for feeling jealous of something that made my daughter feel safe. I watched his hands fix the zipper. Then Sophie came to me for her backpack, because I had packed the folder inside it. Different rolls, overlapping rolls, nothing clean. At the door, Daniel said quietly, I can't compete with a dead man. I shook my head. You're not competing with my ghost. He looked at me. You're competing with my absence. They're not the same thing. And what are you competing with? I looked towards Sophie, who was arguing with Mara about whether a sweater counted as a coat. The version of me who thinks being her father is something I own instead of something I do. Daniel nodded once. That was as close to peace as we got. It was enough. 3 weeks after my funeral, I walked to Mara's house at 6:40 in the morning. The wreath was gone from the front door. The sympathy cards were packed away. People had stopped looking at me like a ghost at the grocery store. Mostly, I had my own apartment now, my own keys, a reduced travel schedule at work, nothing dramatic, no grand vow to become a different man overnight, just fewer automatic yeses to everybody except my daughter. Mara was in the kitchen when I came in. She wore a robe and had one hand around a coffee mug. Sophie's lunchbox was open on the counter. Mara had already started the sandwich. Turkey on wheat. She saw me and stopped. Neither of us spoke. Then she slid the lunchbox across the counter. I took it. There was no ceremony to the gesture. That was why it mattered. I finished the sandwich, cut it diagonally, put fruit in the blue container tucked in the juice box, and tore a piece from the yellow legal pad. Big math test today, you've got this. Love, Dad. I folded the note under the napkin. Sophie came down the hall with one sock on, and her hair doing whatever it wanted. She stopped when she saw me. Then she looked at the sandwich. I like crust now. I looked down. I'd already cut it off. Since when? A while. 2 words. Not accusation. Not even sadness. Just fact. My daughter had changed while I was busy, while I was divorced, while I was unconscious, while people were putting my photograph on funeral programs. Growing up had not waited for me to notice. I reached for another 2 slices of bread. Then crust stays. Sophie smiled. I made the sandwich again. This time I left the crust exactly where it was. She picked up the lunchbox and hugged me from behind while I zipped it closed. You driving me? Yep. Can we get hot chocolate? It's 6:50 in the morning. That's not a no. Mara leaned against the counter, watching us. She and I were not back together. Daniel had not vanished. Nobody had won. That was not what coming home meant anymore. I drove Sophie to school. At the curb, she opened the car door, then leaned back in. Dad, yeah, tomorrow don't write about the math test. It's over. I smiled. What should I write? She thought about it. Something new. Then she shut the door and ran toward the school entrance with the lunchbox bouncing against her backpack. They held my funeral 3 weeks ago. This morning, I packed my daughter's lunch. Tomorrow, I'll write her something new. For now, that's enough.